Welcome to another English podcast provided by LingExam Language Academy. You're listening to Navigating Complex Social Dynamics, a comprehensive guide for advanced English learners, proudly provided by lingexam.com. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. In our, increasingly interconnected world, mastering social dynamics isn't just a nice to have, is it? It's become pretty essential. And for you, as an advanced English learner, it's really a direct pathway to communicating much more effectively. Whether that's, mediating a tricky disagreement among colleagues, maybe managing tensions in a diverse classroom, or just trying to express yourself clearly in sensitive situations. This session is all about giving you the linguistic tools, the toolkit, if you like, to navigate those sometimes awkward social waters with confidence. We're going to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, the real key takeaways from our source material today, Navigating Social Dynamics, an English communication guide, and it's tailored specifically for C1 level English learners like you.
Yes, and what's really fascinating here, I think, is how the source material really highlights that these social situations, where they're hardly never just black and white, are they? It requires
Right.
much more than just knowing the words. It's about getting a handle on tone, structure, those idiomatic expressions that add color, and understanding emotional nuance, which raises a really important question for all of us, I suppose. How do we actually listen effectively to views that oppose our own? How do we manage that emotional tension? And how do we guide conversations towards, compromise and understanding, all while doing it in English?
Exactly.
So we'll be looking at how to stay neutral, acknowledge emotions properly, and communicate with real diplomacy. The aim ultimately is a resolution that benefits everyone involved. Our goal for you by the end of this is to feel, significantly more confident when you're dealing with these delicate social scenarios.
Absolutely. And to get there, we'll start by looking beyond just the basic definitions of essential vocabulary. Words like mediate or de-escalate. We need to unpack their strategic power, really.
Yeah.
We'll delve into why these words matter so much, especially in, high-stakes professional and diplomatic settings, like the UN, NGOs, that sort of thing. Then we'll move on to key phrasal verbs and common idioms, not just listing them, but exploring the kind of cultural and communicative punch they pack.
And we won't just talk about them. We'll actually immerse ourselves in a detailed model dialogue. We'll pull apart the language in action, see exactly how it all fits together. We'll also dissect the critical importance of tone and register in different settings, from a formal negotiation to maybe a more high-tension emotional moment. Because these are often the trickiest parts for advanced learners, aren't they?
They really are. And finally, we'll equip you with a whole suite of practical strategies for effective diplomacy, covering everything from, say, the power of active listening to cultural awareness, and even knowing when the smartest move is actually to bring in a mediator. And importantly, we'll shine a light on some common mistakes that advanced learners sometimes make, just so you can sidestep those communication pitfalls. So yeah, let's get into it.
Right. So when we talk about effectively navigating these complex social dynamics, having a core set of vocabulary isn't just helpful. It's foundational. Let's take mediate, for instance. For a C1 learner, it's not simply about being a go-between, is it? It's about expertly facilitating dialogue, helping to maybe opposing sides to identify their underlying needs and then collaboratively reach an agreement. Think of it as creating a kind of neutral psychological space, a space where both parties feel heard enough to start seeing a shared path forward instead of just digging their heels in. And this often requires the mediator to remain neutral, obviously, not taking sides, to build that essential trust.
That's a really vital distinction. It's not just about what you say, but how you show you're genuinely listening. Which brings us neatly to acknowledge. For a C1 learner, this isn't just about noticing something. It's about explicitly validating an emotion or a situation. Saying something like, I want to acknowledge how incredibly difficult this situation must be for you. That can really disarm tension. It creates safety. And speaking of tension, diffuse tension isn't just about making someone less angry. It's more artful than that. It's about introducing an element, maybe a shared laugh, a pause, a moment of empathy that helps lower the emotional temperature in a heated discussion.
Precisely. And to make any real progress, finding common ground is absolutely crucial. This means identifying those shared interests or opinions that both sides can genuinely agree on. It often serves as the anchor for finding a resolution. And to spot that common ground effectively, you need to be empathetic, which means truly being able to understand and, importantly, share the feelings of another person. The source material really highlights this. Being empathetic can profoundly help build trust and mutual respect. Why? Because people feel understood, not just heard.
Yeah, feeling understood is key. And when you're expressing your own thoughts, being tactful is vital. It means phrasing something sensitively and skillfully, especially when things are delicate. It's the difference between, say, bluntness and finesse, isn't it? Similarly, constructive feedback isn't just criticism, it's helpful advice, specifically meant to improve a situation. And it should always be framed with a positive, solution-oriented intent, rather than just pointing fingers. Then on the flip side, we have escalate, making a conflict worse, and its vital opposite, de-escalate, reducing its intensity. The ability to sense when a conversation is starting to escalate, and then consciously using your language to de-escalate it. Well, that's a real hallmark of an advanced communicator.
It really is. And it's also absolutely critical to hear someone out. This means giving them your complete, undivided attention until they've finished saying everything they want to say. No interruptions. And sometimes, in really delicate or perhaps high-stakes situations, you might feel like you're walking on eggshells, meaning you're being extremely careful about what you say or do because maybe someone is easily upset or the situation itself is highly sensitive. It requires real awareness.
It certainly does. And it's surprisingly easy for conversations to, well, go off track because of a miscommunication, just a failure to communicate successfully.
Yeah.
Or maybe a misunderstanding where someone incorrectly interprets what was actually said or meant. Our ultimate goal, though, is always a resolution, finding a satisfactory solution that settles the problem. And often, that requires compromise, where both sides have to willingly give up something to reach an overall agreement. It's not about one side winning, it's about everyone finding a way to move forward together.
Exactly. And to help achieve that, you might need to facilitate the discussion, which basically means making it smoother and easier for everyone involved. And a golden rule, really, always try to see things from the other person's perspective. It's about understanding their point of view, their experience, their context, what makes them see it that way. Finally, reframe. This is an incredibly powerful tool. It's not just rephrasing, it's about shifting the perspective or maybe the emotional tone of a statement. For example, reframing a problem as a shared challenge immediately changes the energy, doesn't it? It moves from blame towards collaboration. It's subtle, but really effective.
Very powerful. And these words, they aren't just abstract concepts, are they? They are the actual language, the lingua franca, of effective communication in demanding environments. Think professional meetings, therapy sessions, political discussions, any complex workplace interaction, really. The source highlights how diplomats, say in organizations like the UN or various NGOs, train meticulously to use this exact language to acknowledge diverse perspectives, skillfully diffuse tension, and ultimately facilitate peaceful, productive dialogue. So your ability to use them confidently, it truly elevates your communication from just fluent to genuinely influential.
Definitely. And beyond those individual words, mastering phrasal verbs and idioms is what makes your English sound so much more natural, authentic, and, well, culturally fluent. Take speak up, for example. It means expressing your opinion clearly, assertively, especially when it might be difficult or when your voice needs hearing. Don't be afraid to speak up if you feel misunderstood, your perspective is valuable.
Yeah.
Then there's back down, which means withdrawing from an argument or maybe stopping insisting on your position, often just to avoid more conflict.
Right. And if a situation is getting out of hand, a leader might need to step in to intervene and help sort things out. Sometimes all that's needed is a strategic pause, a moment to calm down both yourself and the general atmosphere. And in sensitive situations, it's actually a wonderful sign when someone starts to open up, talking more honestly, maybe more vulnerably, about their feelings. It usually indicates a shift towards trust.
On the other hand, if communication breaks down, that means it's failed entirely, collapsed maybe, often due to a lack of clarity or trust. When you need to introduce a topic that's difficult or sensitive, you bring it up, but you choose your moment and your words quite carefully. But crucially, for diplomacy, try very hard not to cut in or interrupt someone while they're speaking. It just signals disrespect, doesn't it? Ultimately, the immediate goal is often just to sort out a problem or disagreement, find a practical way forward.
And always, always pay attention to how you come across. That's the impression you give, how others perceive you, your tone, your word choice. It can make you come across as maybe insensitive, even if that's the last thing you intended. Now, moving on to idioms, these are so rich with cultural nuance. Bury the hatchet is a lovely one. It means making peace after a big argument, really letting go of past disagreements.
Yes, it implies a real fresh start. And before moving forward on any project or decision, it's absolutely vital to make sure everyone is on the same page, meaning you all have the same understanding, the same information, and you're aligned in what you're trying to achieve. A truly empathetic person will instinctively try to put yourself in someone's shoes, imagining what it feels like to be them. It fosters much deeper understanding and connection.
Yeah, empathy is key. Sometimes, though, a persistent disagreement is simply down to a clash of personalities, just different temperaments rubbing each other the wrong way. And you really can't just sweep a problem under the rug, can you? Meaning ignore it or hide it, hoping it'll just vanish. It always needs addressing eventually for a true resolution. So, to resolve a misunderstanding or perhaps lingering bad feelings, you need to clear the air, address the issues openly, head on.
A very common and powerful idiom is the elephant in the room. We've all encountered this. It refers to that major, obvious issue that everyone knows is there, but no one wants to talk about, usually because it's uncomfortable or awkward. And we've probably all been in a heated argument at some point, intense, emotional, often quite passionate disagreement. In situations like that, you often need to tread carefully, meaning you must be exceptionally cautious about what you say or do because the situation is highly sensitive, maybe volatile.
Tread very carefully. And if you're not sure how someone might react to, say, a sensitive suggestion or maybe a new idea, you might want to test the waters. Try it out gently, tentatively, before you fully commit. Gauge the reaction first. Okay, now that we have these linguistic tools, this vocabulary, and these idioms in our toolkit, let's see how they actually work together in a real-world kind of scenario. Let's look at a model dialogue.
Right. This is a scenario involving colleagues, Alice and Daniel. They've developed a conflict at work over some project deadlines, and their manager, Sophia, steps in to mediate.
Okay, so Sophia starts things off, sets the stage. Thanks for meeting today, both of you. I understand there's been some tension, and I wanted to create a space for us to clear the air. Alice, would you like to start by explaining your perspective on the situation? And Alice responds, sure, I felt quite frustrated because I believed Daniel had agreed to submit the designs by Monday, but nothing was delivered, which impacted my part of the project.
Daniel then replies, that's true, the designs weren't ready, but I never confirmed Monday as a firm deadline. I genuinely needed more time for the quality assurance. I thought we were on the same page regarding the flexibility, but apparently there was a misunderstanding on my part. Then Sophia uses a really crucial mediation technique. It sounds like there may have been some miscommunication around expectations. Daniel, do you acknowledge that the lack of absolute clarity on the deadline caused stress for Alice?
And Daniel takes responsibility, which is great. Yes, I absolutely do. I should have spoken up more clearly about my limitations and clarified the timeline. Alice then responds quite gracefully. I really appreciate you saying that, Daniel. I guess I also should have double-checked instead of simply assuming. Sophia praises them, gently guiding them. I truly admire how you're both willing to take responsibility and acknowledge your roles. Let's focus now on finding common ground. What practical steps can we take to move forward constructively and prevent this kind of situation in the future?
Daniel suggests something practical. Perhaps we can set up a shared digital deadline calendar that everyone can access and update in real time. Alice enthusiastically agrees. I like that idea a lot. And also, let's commit to brief check-ins at the start of each week, just to align. Sophia then concludes, bringing it all to a positive close. That sounds like a very sensible and effective compromise. Thank you both for being so open and collaborative. Let's bury the hatchet on this one and build from here.
That dialogue is a brilliant illustration, isn't it? It shows so many of the terms and strategies we've just discussed in practical action. Clear the air, right at the start address the tension. On the same page, highlighted that need for shared understanding. Sophia was very skillful using miscommunication to label the core issue and prompting Daniel to acknowledge Alice's feelings. That's a classic de-escalation technique.
Exactly. And both Alice and Daniel chose to take responsibility, which, let's face it, is often the first and maybe the hardest step towards resolving things. Sophia then expertly guided them towards finding common ground and urged them to focus on the future, move forward, prevent this, shifting the focus firmly onto solutions, not blame. The Great Compromise showed their mutual agreement, and finishing with bury the hatchet really marked a clear, positive end to the conflict. It's like a mini masterclass in applied diplomatic English.
Yeah, it really is. And what stands out so clearly there is that it's not just what you say, but fundamentally how you say it. Tone and register. Absolutely vital, especially, I think, for C1 learners mastering these nuances. Register, of course, refers to the specific style of language for a particular context. Think about the difference in words and sentence structure talking to your best mate versus addressing your CEO. Tone, naturally, is the emotional color in your voice, which often conveys much more than the words themselves. So in a formal professional setting, you might use phrases like, I acknowledge your concerns, or let's find a constructive solution. Very measured.
Whereas in a casual or perhaps more friendly setting, you'd naturally use softer language. Something like, I see your point, or maybe let's just talk it out. The shift in register makes it appropriate. And in those high tension moments, it's absolutely critical to try and de-escalate using expressions like, let's perhaps take a moment to calm down, or I think we're both getting a bit emotional here, perhaps we should reset this conversation. Your careful choice of words, coupled with the right tone, that really signals your emotional intelligence and your command of English.
Definitely. So let's talk about some top strategies then for expertly navigating these complex social interactions. First, and you could argue it's the most crucial, is actively listening before responding. Most people think listening is just waiting for their turn to speak, don't they? But true active listening, well, it's an act of genuine understanding. It can be quite disarming. It often shifts the whole dynamic away from conflict towards collaboration, simply by making the other person feel genuinely heard.
Yeah.
Using phrases like, let me just make sure I've understood you correctly, or so if I heard you right, you're saying, demonstrates empathy and stops misunderstandings before they start.
Yes, absolutely key. And always try to use neutral and non-blaming language. This is a real game changer. Instead of saying you never help with the workload, which immediately makes someone defensive, try framing it from your perspective. I sometimes feel quite overwhelmed when I'm managing these tasks alone. See. This approach focuses on your experience, which is hard to argue with, right? It reduces defensiveness and creates a better foundation for actually solving the problem, and always try to frame conversations around solutions. Intentionally shift the focus away from picking apart the problem and towards collaboratively exploring what could be done differently next time.
Another key strategy, and one that's often overlooked, is simply to pause when emotions run high. Suggest taking a 5-minute break, or even just a moment to breathe and cool off. This simple act can prevent emotional damage and gives everyone vital space for reflection, allowing logic to sort of catch up with emotion. And it's not just about logic. You absolutely need to validate emotions. Saying something like, I can completely see why you feel that way, or it's totally understandable to be upset in this situation, creates emotional safety and rapport, even if you don't actually agree with their specific viewpoint.
Validation is powerful. And using I statements is incredibly effective because it takes ownership of your feelings without blaming others. For instance, I felt incredibly frustrated when the plans changed suddenly, rather than, you always change plans without telling anyone. No one can really argue with how you felt, which again creates that foundation for problem solving instead of just more defensiveness. It encourages accountability from both sides.
And of course, in our increasingly globalized world, maintaining cultural awareness is just paramount, isn't it? Different cultures have vastly different approaches to things like directness, personal space, body language, even how disagreement is shown. So using culturally neutral phrases like, that's an interesting point, could you tell me a bit more about your reasoning, shows respect and encourages deeper understanding rather than making assumptions.
That's a great example. And finally, know when to involve a mediator. Sometimes, despite your very best efforts, you need an objective third party. Maybe a team leader, perhaps an HR representative, someone impartial to help break an impasse. Don't hesitate to diplomatically suggest it. Something like, would you be open to having someone impartial help us work through this? It shows maturity and a real commitment to finding a resolution.
Good advice. Now let's quickly touch on some common mistakes that even advanced English learners can sometimes make, which might derail even the best intentions. Firstly, interrupting or cutting in. It's tempting sometimes, but always try to let others finish their thoughts. If you really need to interject, use a polite turn-taking cue, may just add something quickly after you finish your point.
Yes, politeness goes a long way, and definitely try to avoid using absolutes like always and never. These exaggerations almost immediately create defensiveness, and let's be honest, they rarely reflect reality accurately. Instead, use specific examples and moderate your language. Maybe, I've noticed a pattern where X sometimes happens instead of X always happens, much less confrontational. Also, never underestimate or ignore your tone of voice. It can completely change the meaning of a neutral phrase, make it sound confrontational. Practice controlling your intonation to sound calm, confident, and respectful.
And while difficult conversations are, well, inherently uncomfortable, avoiding the conversation altogether is usually worse.
Yeah.
It just allows tension and resentment to build up and fester. If something needs addressing, try to initiate it. You could use introductory phrases like, could we perhaps talk about something that's been on my mind? I think it's important we discuss it.
Yeah, tackling it head on gently. And a final, really crucial point, specifically for advanced English learners. Avoid translating directly from your native language. Some expressions or grammatical structures just don't translate well. They can end up sounding blunt, or maybe overly emotional, or even unintentionally rude in English, despite your good intentions. Really focus on learning and internalizing native English expressions for diplomacy and nuance. It makes a huge difference to how you come across.
Absolutely. So, what does all this mean for you listening in? We've really tried to unpack the complexities of navigating social dynamics in English today, from understanding the strategic power behind specific words and idioms to implementing really effective, practical communication strategies. Hopefully, you now feel better equipped with the linguistic tools you need to mediate, perhaps de-escalate and facilitate genuine understanding in whatever sensitive situations you might encounter. And remember, this isn't just about language skills. It's a high-level communication ability that powerfully demonstrates maturity, cultural awareness, and crucially, emotional intelligence.
Mhm. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, mastering these nuanced skills means becoming not just a fluent English speaker, but actually a truly respected and influential communicator in any environment, professional or personal. So this raises an important question for you, our listener, to maybe reflect on. How can you actively apply these insights and strategies in your very next challenging conversation? And perhaps a final thought. Remember, every difficult conversation, if approached with these tools, is actually an invaluable opportunity, an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to genuinely strengthen your relationships.
Well said. Now that you've completed this guide, we definitely invite you to explore even more valuable content over at LingExam Language Academy. You can read our next tutorial article, which is perfect for everyday workplace situations. Mediating a conflict between colleagues. The complete C1 guide for successful workplace resolution. In that comprehensive C1 level guide, you'll delve even deeper into essential vocabulary, key phrases, detailed strategies for staying neutral.
Crucial.
Effective methods for paraphrasing different viewpoints, powerful techniques for de-escalating emotions, and proven ways to guide conflicting parties towards a resolution. It's packed with real-world model dialogues and practical activities, too. Mastering these specific skills can really enhance your professional reputation, help build much stronger teams, and genuinely advance your career path. You can find this article and many more valuable resources by visiting our website, lingexam.com. That's LINGEXAM.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this exploration into navigating complex social dynamics. We look forward to guiding your learning in very soon.